Stevenson, obviously, yeah, some eyes on two there. I think
Let's
probably.
so
Are we not going?
we're not ready to go in yet.
I mean, now we're going.
Now we're
Okay.
going.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Utah Senate legislative update. Today we are working on Senate bills on the floor. The only one that really got a lot of attention was Senator Stevenson's bill, and we have him here today. He could address some questions on the MITA bill.
He told me to talk about budget instead, so you wouldn't be bothering him.
I tried to get people to come and talk about fireplaces. I figured it would be a smoke screen.
Questions for Senator Stevenson? Did you have a question?
Well, yeah, you had several eye on twos there. That do you get the sense that this is that they're just expressing reservations, or are you have work left to do before you?
I think it's the latter. I think I've got some work to do with my colleagues before we get this passed. And I think there's also some work to do in the House, but I don't want to call it for them.
Okay. The overarching concern, I guess, was that the governors with questionable authority granted a tax exemption to an entity that's the taxpayers are going to have to kind of be left holding the bag, I guess.
Well, I'm not sure the taxpayers left holding the bag. I mean, this is certainly an optional tax that we can charge. And I don't really want to put the blame heavily on the governor. I think there was some negotiations that went on that pretty much no one here right now was privileged to, with maybe the exception of the governor. And he tried to clarify that for us. And, the NSA were very adamant that when they committed to come here, that it was there was no tax discussed, and they certainly hadn't budgeted for it. It's a big item. One thing I would say though is, one of the items that bailed our economy out through the recession was the construction of the NSA building. That was about $1.6 billion in construction, and between that and City Creek and the highway project, that really helped us through the recessionary times and kept a lot of construction jobs being used. So it isn't that we did not get a benefit from it, but this particular piece of tax it's really not going away completely. It's just being held. If there was a project that came here that was deemed necessary, we could put that tax back in place. If they were, I don't know what to use for an example, but say there was another project tied with the NSA where they needed adjacent property or something that was outside of the Camp Williams boundary, or possibly some infrastructure that we could help them with. It would be, the way the bill is structured, it's possible for them to come back in and open that back up, say we'll pay the tax, and then MITA would take that tax and use it to assist in that project. And that's really what MITA does. They have the ability to collect taxes and use them back into projects that assist our military.
Do you foresee any consequences if the legislation doesn't pass and the tax is levied?
I guess they could refuse to pay, and so then maybe we could turn off their utilities. No, I'm joking here. I don't know what. That was on the radio this morning, though. The state of Virginia is frustrated with the NSA building they have there, and there's talk of someone is making noise about turning off utilities. And I don't really want to secede. I think that was tried once and failed.
So you just think that the NSA would refuse to pay it if the state said that they needed to?
Certainly possible.
I'm trying to remember, I don't remember the history on this. I guess this agreement that they get this tax break, is that in the negotiations in a contract, or is that just a verbal?
It was in a negotiation, but it was a verbal.
And just so I'm clear, I guess the state typically doesn't tax federal property anyway, right? I mean,
That's
correct. But this is sort of different because it's a fee on the utilities. Is that how it's different, or is it?
It's a fee on the utilities. It's a fee on the utilities, a franchise fee, just like the cities put on. Any city, you're probably being taxed, regardless of where you live. You're being taxed on gas, power, and probably a phone bill.
Yeah.
And that's used for city operations. MITA could have used it, done the same thing. They could have used that to operate.
But that's how you get around the federal exemption on
correct.
taxes.
And every state in Utah has the option of putting those taxes in place or not putting them in place.
Senator Hilliard, the speaker today, was in a public ed committee talking about her education initiative. They're still talking about $300 million for the whole package. What are your, I mean, do you have a clearer picture of where the money might be able to come from, or what might be available for that?
You know, I've never talked to her about it, so I don't know where she's looking. Obviously, there's the new revenue projections, assuming they hold, to the November figures coming back in. I've heard discussion about some of the general fund going into highways in Senate Bill 229. I've heard about other monies that may be in Health and Human Services from some of the overestimations there. I think it'll be hard for any of those committees to give any of the money up, because I'm sure they've identified priorities and needs within their committee. So I don't know how much she needs one time. I don't know how much she needs ongoing. I personally think I've learned enough about computers that they're not one-time expenditures. And when you invest in computers, there's always an obligation to keep up, not only in software, but occasionally some of the hardware as well. But
you'll need routers. You'll need more bandwidth coming into the routers. You'll need content.
Yeah. So
Content update.
I have no idea. I didn't know she was making the presentation, or I probably would have been there instead of my leadership meeting, because I need to hear what she needs to do, and I know President Niederhauser has been asking the same kinds of questions.
Senator Davis, have you had a chance to
I have not looked at
Just
that entire issue
on the surface?
all the way, but I think with all of the other needs in education, I think it really creates a tension that I guess worthy of discussion, but where it falls out, I'm not sure.
I should add this too. I talked to Senator Stevenson in public ed and Senator Urquhart in higher ed, and told them that not only had they spent all the new money in their committees separately, but that Senator Harper has some real needs for AR&I, or capital improvements. And we've liked to in the past put ongoing revenue. I know over 50% of the building repair work we do is higher ed, and so you could use education money there. But we have, I'm going to go by memory now, about 40-something million of ongoing there. We filled it in with about 50 million of one time. That'll go away this year. Our goal really is to put it up to about 104 million to get to 1.1%. So those are some issues there for both one time and ongoing. It's general fund money that we have ongoing in there right now, and that we need to put in more education fund, both one time and ongoing. So there's no shortage of lists of requests.
Needs were great in business and economic development this morning also. So the lists just continue to grow.
We're in favor of funding growth, and we don't know how much would go to the WPU, but we feel like there needs to be money going to the WPU also.
And that growth is about 60 million, and WPU is 25%.
Close.
Yeah. But same token, if we do a WPU increase for salaries and benefits for public ed, we certainly have a concurrent obligation to our public employees too. And that all of that gets up to be about 50 million for 1% for everyone. So the money goes pretty quickly.
Any other, Senator Valentine?
I'm here to report that we're below average, Mr. President. We have had...
In this case, we applaud that.
We applaud that.
For the rules.
The Rules Committee. Through week number 2, we've had a total of 440 bills passed. The average on week number 2 is 454. Excuse me, that's bills introduced. So 440 bills introduced, and the average is 454 bills introduced. Bills passed, we've had 15 through the end of week 2 that have passed. The average is 19. So in both of our metrics, we are below average.
What's the high water mark on that
The
first
high water
page?
mark on introductions is 541, and we're at 440. This is on introductions.
And what year was that?
And that was in 2008.
Okay.
And the high week for passage was actually 32, and that was in 2012. So we have significantly below average this year.
Thank you for that report. Any
It was
questions?
it was helping on the base budget.
Yeah.
Now, how many, do you have a number for how many bill files are open? Because I think for you,
I have the bills that have been numbered. There's 440 that have been numbered.
okay.
And I don't have the total number of bill files open. At one point in time, it was looking very large, but for some reason, people have been abandoning bills quickly.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, yesterday or in the past few days, several amicus briefs to the Amendment 3 case were filed. One was from a legislator and several other legislators signed on in support of that brief. Just wanted to get kind of your opinion on that and how that brief is different from the state's case or the Attorney General's case or some of the other briefs by religious organizations that were filed. I don't know if any of you sitting here
I think Senator Valentine could answer that the best.
Senator Valentine?
Go over here.
I've been in practice as a lawyer for 36 years, and I can tell you that I've been involved with some pretty heavy cases. In fact, I was involved with Utah's case on the 4th Congressional seat when we were litigating that all the way to the Supreme Court. I don't think I've seen such an outpouring of public sentiment on both sides of this issue that has come out in the briefs. The brief that I personally signed on to, it was in conjunction with a number of other legislators. We basically wanted to show the courts how important a home environment for children is. And we outlined the whole statutory framework that we have for the raising of children and the long historical reasons why civilizations has recognized marriage as between a man and a woman. That was one area that we felt like the state's brief really didn't adequately cover. And so those of us who wanted to join in that particular amicus brief joined in on that particular issue. There were a number of other amicus briefs that are being filed, from my understanding, from other organizations, other groups, other individuals. The courts may or may not even take into consideration the amicus briefs that any of us file, but they oftentimes will give additional outline of information that the court could consider when it's making such a monumental decision.
Thank you.
Can you, I guess from your experience, tell us how much these outside briefs have influence on cases, or what they're...
I can tell you that sometimes they have virtually no influence, and sometimes they have a significant influence. And the reason I answer it that way is that it depends on how important the particular case is. This one is very important, and I suspect the amicus briefs will be reviewed by the staff and by the justices of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. That's where they've been filed at this point.
Okay. Do we have a text question?
Got a couple, and I bet you can't guess what they're about. One person tweeted in, when will SB 100 be heard? Another tweeted in, why are you so afraid to hear SB 100?
Senator Oberlin.
You know, as everyone knows, SB 100 or a bill like it has been filed for the last several years and was heard in committee last year. This year, what we're saying is we're really focused on our attempts as a state to make sure that we are behind the Amendment 3 filing that we have before the courts, and to make sure that we are not saying anything to detract from that. We don't want the rhetoric that could go along with Senate Bill 100 or some of the religious liberties bills that have been filed in the House to detract from what we think is this important case, maybe one of the most important cases ever in defense of our Citizens Amendment 3, which was passed a few years ago, resoundingly. So, the process is moving forward. That bill is in rules, and if it had the votes to come out of rules, could be heard. That's the process. That's the way it works. We've had a number of people up here expressing their opinion, and we welcome them. It's a great process, and I was walking around with my little fourth grade kids yesterday that came up for my other bill, and a couple of them said, "What are those people doing?" when they were standing in front of the governor's office doors, and they said, "They're expressing their opinion." That's part of the process. And this is the people's house. We welcome them to be here. We welcome them to make the statements that they want to make, as long as they're legal. As long as they're not illegal, then we have no way to justify an illegal act, and so they have to deal with the law. So the process will move forward, as it always does. One of the things that we find up here is it oftentimes is a multi-year process to get a bill or an idea through. And sometimes it takes several years for an idea to become a law or to get through this process. We're going to stay focused, I believe, on the Amendment 3 defense this year. And next year, that bill may move forward and who knows, may become law. But this year we're staying focused, and that kind of explains the process a little bit, and we welcome those who want to make comments to that and who want to be involved in the process. We certainly welcome them to be involved.
There's a follow-up question that just came in over text. What does housing and employment discrimination have to do with marriage equality?
The rhetoric that goes along with that, and I think we're seeing that. I think we've seen how the rhetoric that goes along with this bill, the very strong feelings, can detract from what we think is a very important legal issue that we're dealing with. As we see the statements that are being made, the kinds of emotional responses that were being seen, 13 arrests yesterday from people who did break the law. We certainly, again, welcome those people to be involved in the process, but we can't have them stop us from being able to do our work. And so we believe that rhetoric, that strong emotion that is involved with this issue, and the others that would certainly come forward if we decide we were going to open both doors. We have that big discussion. Obviously is going to detract from what we're trying to accomplish.
I'm not sure. I just want to explore the logic in that, because you're saying that if you allowed them to be heard, there would be strong rhetoric created, so you don't allow them to be heard, and there's strong rhetoric. I mean, it seems like the rhetoric is a result of not hearing the bills in one instance, and you're using that as justification for not hearing the bills.
Well, your argument is true halfway.
Okay.
Because if we have just 100, which is where the rhetoric is being heard now, then we're also going to hear the religious freedom and all those other arguments out there, and then you bring a lot of different very strong emotions into the mix, and it becomes even more difficult.
And there's also some legal issues with this. I know that Senator Valentine's been involved in that, framing the legal aspect of this and the environment. I know you've articulated that before.
Yeah, I have a slightly different take from our good majority leader. My take is this, that when we are in court dealing with the framework issue, which is the Constitution, it's difficult to then pass statutory changes underneath that framework, which is in the process of being examined. So for me as a lawyer, I'd rather see the examination go forward on the issue of the framework of whether or not the Constitution is valid, rather than trying to take additional changes to that framework by constitutional amendments, which one representative has, or by taking changes to the rights of a person who is being tested under that constitutional framework, which is Senate Bill 100, or testing the other issues of religious freedom, which are the kind of counterbalance to some of the arguments that are being made in the Supreme Court on the issue of Amendment 3. So when you have so much still swirling around trying to determine what the proper ground rules are, it seems like to me the most appropriate thing to say, let's take a breath. Let's say, everybody just allow the court to work through its process before we come back and visit both sides of this particular issue. Senate Bill 100, its protege, had a public hearing, passed a committee, and went on to the board last year. So it's had some public debate. But the idea of now public debate in this particular environment, where you are still trying to test the ground rules of whether or not our Constitution, upon which all statutes are built, is valid, just from a legal standpoint, I'd rather see the constitutional issues be decided first.
Need to get you guys your copies.
Thank you for that text, and thank you for being here today.